Coming to pass as the least successful of the BR Standard class steam locomotives, the Class 6 Clan class was a small fleet of 10 locomotives that were originally meant to be the vanguard of a much wider range of engines that would have complemented the larger Britannias as a light Pacific variant with greater flexibility across the network. Unfortunately, initial teething problems meant major modifications needed to be implemented on these locomotives in order to develop a wider fleet beyond the 10 pilot engines delivered in the early 1950s. But by the time a solution was presenting itself, the 1955 modernization plan had been established, and the future was set for diesel and electric traction that rendered the clans extinct by the middle of the 1960s. The Class 6, alongside the wider BR Standard fleet, can trace its roots back to the period immediately following the end of World War II, where Britain's railway infrastructure was in a state of severe disrepair, with the conflict having placed immense pressure on the nation's transport systems, leading to significant overuse of existing locomotives without the corresponding investment needed to maintain or replace them. When the railways were nationalised in 1948 to form British Railways, the new organisation inherited a vast but inconsistent array of locomotives drawn from the former Big Four companies, being composed of hundreds of different locomotive types, some of which were already obsolete, others barely fit for continued service, and many built to regional specifications that hampered efficient maintenance and operation on a unified network. Recognizing the need to impose order and efficiency upon this fragmented system, the railway executive embarked on a bold program of standardization, the heart of which was the creation of a series of standard steam locomotive classes that could be used across the entire British Railways network, with these new engines being designed to incorporate the best features of pre-nationalisation practice while focusing on key priorities such as ease of maintenance, operational economy, mechanical simplicity, and a high degree of standardization in parts and fittings. By 1948, the first conceptual plans for the new standard classes was taking shape, and among these was the proposal to develop 4 distinct Pacific-type locomotives, each representing a different power classification of Group 8, 7, 6, and 5, while adopting the standard 462 wheel arrangement that was already favoured for express and mixed traffic duties due to its ability to accommodate a large, wide firebox behind the driving wheels. This layout allowed for the efficient combustion of lower-grade or imported coal, which was an important consideration in the post-war years when coal quality varied, with Power Group 8 being intended for the heaviest express duties, while Group 7 would serve slightly lighter but still demanding express and mixed traffic roles, and Group 6 and 5 were envisaged for intermediate duties. The Class 5 Pacific was ultimately dropped during the planning phase, with this decision being rooted in the realization that existing 460 locomotives, particularly those of LMS and GWR origin, already performed capably in roles envisaged for a 5MT Pacific, while at the same time, developing and building a new type to cover duties that were already being managed competently was seen as unnecessary and economically unjustifiable, especially in an era of post-war austerity and budgetary caution. The focus shifted instead to developing a Pacific with a 6MT power rating, or a locomotive that could be light enough to run on secondary main lines and yet powerful enough to handle a range of passenger and mixed traffic services, with one of the major influences on this line of thinking being the Southern Railway's family of light Pacific locomotives designed by Oliver Bulliard in the 1940s. These locomotives, particularly the West Country and Battle of Britain classes, demonstrated that a Pacific locomotive could be constructed with reduced axle loading and lighter frames, thereby achieving far greater route availability than heavier counterparts, and despite being large, powerful machines, the light Pacifics were successfully engineered to run on a significant proportion of the southern region's network, much of which featured tight curves, lightweight track, and restrictive clearances. This principle was compellingly demonstrated during the 1948 locomotive exchange trials, a set of national test runs organized to compare the performance of different locomotive types across a variety of routes, with one such trial seeing Southern Railway Light Pacific number 34004 Yeovil deployed on the Highland main line between Perth and Inverness. This route was notoriously difficult, with steep gradients, twisting alignments, and limited facilities. Yet despite this, Yeovil performed admirably, shaving 15 minutes off the schedule and displaying a level of performance that surprised many, with the trial proving that a lightly constructed Pacific locomotive could not only handle challenging terrain, but do so with enough power and efficiency to make a tangible impact on service timings. The success of this trial had a significant effect on locomotive design thinking at British Railways, reinforcing the idea that a 6MT Pacific, built with a similar philosophy of lightweight construction and a good power-to-weight ratio, could offer a highly flexible solution to the needs of the network, particularly in Scotland, where many routes were restricted by civil engineering limitations. The western half of the Scottish region, for instance, was characterised by tortuous gradients, old infrastructure, and weight-limited lines such as the route to Stranraer, with the conventional Class 7 or 8 Pacific being simply too heavy for these routes. But a carefully engineered 6MT locomotive could provide the power needed for express and mixed traffic duties without exceeding the route loading constraints. Construction of the Class 6 took place at Crewe Works, and each locomotive was built with a boiler operating at a working pressure of 225 pounds per square inch, with the boilers, though similar in general construction to those fitted to the Britannias, being of a reduced diameter in order to keep the weight within acceptable limits for wider route availability. The locomotives were equipped with two outside cylinders, each measuring 19.5 inches in diameter, with a 28-inch stroke, while the coupled driving wheels were 6 foot 2 inches in diameter, a dimension carefully chosen to balance power with speed capability, with this combination of features yielding a starting tractive effort of 27,520 pounds force, placing the Class 6 squarely in the 6MT power classification, suitable for mixed traffic duties that included express passenger services and fast goods trains. Much of the fleet's mechanical arrangement and overall construction drew upon components already developed for the Class 7 Britannias, including the use of the same frame structure, tender design, and general arrangement of running gear, with this extensive commonality of parts being a deliberate feature of the British Railways standardization programme, intended to ease the burden of maintenance facilities and reduce the complexity and cost of spare parts manufacture and storage across the nationalised system. The boiler design incorporated a wide firebox that allowed the engine to burn a broader range of coal types, including imported low-grade coal, which had become increasingly common in the post-war years, with the wide firebox also helping to spread the locomotive's weight more evenly over the rear driving axles and trailing truck, thus contributing to the design's relatively low axle loading of under 19 tons. However, although the overall weight-saving measures were successful in improving the Class 6's route availability, certain aspects of the design introduced performance limitations, with one of the most significant drawbacks being the fitting of a single chimney of relatively small diameter, with this component restricting the exhaust flow from the cylinders, resulting in a poor drafting effect, which in turn led to suboptimal steaming performance, particularly when the locomotive was worked hard. The Class 6s were fitted with standard Walschaerts valve gear, a reliable and widely used mechanism that controlled the admission of steam to the cylinders, with this gear being noted for its durability and ease of maintenance, while each engine was also paired with a BR1 type tender, capable of carrying 4,200 gallons of water and a generous supply of coal, giving the locomotives respectable operational range and flexibility on longer distance services. A total of 10 locomotives, bearing the numbers 72,000 to 72009, were constructed at Crewe Works over a 5-month period stretching from December 1951 to April 1952, with these engines forming the inaugural batch of what was originally intended to be a much larger class of 25 locomotives, with the first of the class being 72,000, which was followed by a steady succession of new locomotives. Each locomotive would be named after a historic Scottish clan, continuing a tradition established by the earlier Highland Railways clan-class locomotives of the early 20th century, and in January 1952, a formal naming ceremony for 72,000 as Clan Buchanan took place at Glasgow Central Station, where the nameplates were unveiled by the Lord Provost, symbolising the locomotive's importance to Scotland's national rail network. In the end, the naming of what was dubbed the Clan class included Clan Buchanan, a clan from the eastern shore of Loch Lomond, Clan Cameron of Lochaber, Clan Campbell of Argyll, Clan Fraser of the Scottish Lowlands, Clan MacDonald of the Western Isles, Clan MacGregor of the Central Highlands, which was notable for the famous Jacobite outlaw Rob Roy and was among the first clans to play the bagpipes, Clan Mackenzie of the Northwest Highlands, Clan Mackintosh also of the Central Highlands, Clan MacLeod of the Outer Hebrides, and Clan Stewart of the Southern Highlands around Perth. All 10 of the completed clans were allocated to the Scottish region of British Railways, with the first 5, 72,000 to 72004, being assigned to Polmadie Depot in Glasgow, while the remaining 5, 72005 to 72009, were based at Carlisle Kingmore, and in their early period of operation, feedback from seasoned crews within the Scottish region was, on the whole, highly encouraging. A detailed report compiled in 1952 by KRM Cameron, the running and maintenance officer for the region, offered a notably positive assessment of the new class, in which he commended their fuel economy, particularly noting the efficiency of the firebox design, which allowed the locomotives to generate steam freely and consistently while consuming relatively little coal, with recorded consumption averaging just 31.8 pounds of coal per mile, a remarkably frugal figure when compared with many other mixed traffic or express designs then in use. Despite these internal endorsements, the clans did not enter service without their shortcomings, as due to the haste with which they were introduced, they bypassed formal testing at the Rugby Locomotive Testing Station, where faults in the design could have been identified and corrected before the locomotives were exposed to frontline duty, and in service, it soon became clear that certain features were suboptimal. Notably, the design of the blast pipe and chimney, both of which were relatively narrow, caused issues with drafting, and thus resulted in difficulties generating and maintaining steam under demanding conditions, particularly when operated by unfamiliar crews. And in response, modifications were gradually introduced during routine maintenance, among the most important being adjustments to the blast pipe dimensions, which improved steaming capacity and brought the locomotives closer to their intended performance profile. Nevertheless, the class proved itself in the daily work of the region, with the clans regularly hauling express and semi-fast passenger trains between Glasgow and Carlisle, and on the arduous route between Carlisle and Stranraer, with their ability to negotiate steep gradients, particularly those on Shap and Beattock summits, without the assistance of banking engines, demonstrating that, when properly handled, they were capable and resilient performers. Their work on the twisting and steep Dumfries to Stranraer line was especially noted, offering proof of concept for the lighter Pacific configuration that had inspired their creation, yet their limited number and the fact that they were confined to only 2 depots prevented wider familiarity across British Railways' operational staff, with many footplate crews across other regions encountering them only occasionally, leading to negative impressions when the locomotives were mishandled or asked to perform duties beyond their design capabilities. Plans for a second batch of 15 locomotives, detailed under Crew Works Order Lot 242, were accepted in 1952, with these new engines benefiting from lessons learned during the operation of the first batch, with a range of design refinements already identified for implementation, with 5 of the proposed locomotives being earmarked for the southern region, and would have received names drawn from southern England's maritime and historical traditions, such as Hengist, Horsa, Canute, Wildfire and Firebrand. The remaining 10 were intended to continue the Scottish allocation and would have extended the clan-based naming convention, with the frames for 72010 Hengist being laid down, marking the commencement of the second tranche of production. However, by 1954, a severe international steel shortage caused widespread disruption to industrial output in Britain, and the construction of steam locomotives was among the first casualties of this bottleneck, with work on the second batch of plans being suspended, while a year later, a profound change in the trajectory of steam locomotive development within British Railways came with the publication of the 1955 Modernisation Plan. This marked a decisive policy shift, outlining a strategic move away from steam traction in favour of diesel and electric alternatives, with the aim of overhauling an increasingly outdated and costly railway system. And as a direct consequence of this initiative, the proposed second batch of clan locomotives was cancelled, alongside a wider proposal for a full build-out of 118 Class 6 locomotives, with the resources originally earmarked for the clans being redirected to the production of diesels. In spite of this curtailment, the existing clan locomotives remained in regular and often challenging service throughout the remainder of the 1950s, with the class proving adaptable across a range of duties, including express passenger workings, fixed traffic turns and freight haulage, while their work took them along some of the most arduous routes in the British railway network, including the steep gradients of the Settle and Carlisle line, demonstrating steady traction, reliable steaming when properly fired, and the mechanical benefits of standardized components derived from the larger Britannia class. In early 1956, the class's potential was further highlighted during a successful trial on the West Highland line, when 72001 Clan Cameron was tested on this notoriously steep and sinuous route and performed with sufficient competence to be authorized for further use, and thus it became the only Pacific-type locomotive to have officially operated over this challenging line. That summer, Clan Cameron was also employed on special trains during the Clan Cameron Gathering, further underlining the locomotive's cultural and symbolic value within Scotland, with these high points contrasting with a more muted reception elsewhere on the network, where the clan class suffered from a mixed reception, with much of this coming when the clans were mistakenly assigned to Class 7 duties due to their outwardly similar appearance, and thus understandably struggled to maintain timekeeping on heavier trains. In August 1958, BR sought to evaluate the clan class under different operating conditions by allocating 72009 Clan Stewart to the eastern region for trials based out of Stratford Depot, with the locomotive being tested on services between London Liverpool Street and East Anglian destinations such as Norwich, Clacton and Harwich, though this brief experiment was undermined by a strong regional preference for the Britannias and a lack of operational enthusiasm for the clans. By the beginning of 1960, clans remained on their assignments in Scotland, but also found themselves working, on occasion, express passenger and parcels traffic between cities such as Glasgow, Crewe, Liverpool, Manchester, Edinburgh and Leeds, as well as contributing to fast freight duties across the same broad corridor. By 1961, however, British Railways' commitment to diesel traction had become increasingly evident, and large-scale deployment of diesel-electric locomotives was beginning to erode the work available to steam, while at the same time, heavier and more powerful standard Class 7 Britannias and the solitary Class 8 Pacific Duke of Gloucester were being transferred north as they were displaced from southern routes. This influx of higher-powered locomotives made the two-cylinder clan-class machines appear increasingly superfluous on top-link duties, and consequently, the clans began to be reassigned to more secondary work, much of which involved shorter or slower services, lighter freight trains, or irregular standby duties. Nevertheless, the class began to find a niche during this period, as with dieselization having its own teething problems, including frequent mechanical failures and low availability rates, the clans often stepped in to substitute for these newer but unreliable traction forms, with their utility in this regard being particularly noted on named trains such as the Thames Clyde Express and the Queen of Scots Pullman, where the clan locomotives demonstrated commendable reliability and timekeeping when crewed by experienced men. Their maintenance arrangements were also revised during this time, as although they had originally been overhauled at Crewe, responsibility was shifted in the spring of 1958 to Cowlairs Works in Glasgow, which not only shortened turnaround times, but also aligned the locomotive servicing with their regional sphere of operation, enhancing mechanical support and responsiveness. Despite this brief resurgence, the writing was already on the wall, and by early 1962, it had become clear that no future existed for the clan class, with that December seeing the first of 5 members of the class, 72,000 Clan Buchanan, 72001 Clan Cameron, 72002 Clan Campbell, 72003 Clan Fraser, and 72004 Clan MacDonald, be simultaneously withdrawn from Polmadie Shed, with these engines moving to Darlington after a period of storage at Glasgow Parkhead, where they were cut up for scrap during 1964. Withdrawals continued throughout 1965, with April seeing 72005 Clan MacGregor be retired from active service at Carlisle Kingmore, having provided over 13 years of service since entering traffic in February 1952, while later that year, 2 more locomotives, 72007 Clan Mackintosh and 72009 Clan Stewart, also met the same fate, leaving only 2 clan locomotives still in operation by the start of 1966. The final act came in the spring of that year, when on May 21st, the last remaining locomotives, 72006 Clan Mackenzie and 72008 Clan MacLeod, were withdrawn from Carlisle Kingmore, with the scrapping of Clan MacLeod in August of the same year, rendering the BR Standard Class 6 or Clan class extinct, with 72008 having enjoyed the longest working life of the entire class, having survived for 14 years and 3 months since its introduction in March 1952. In the wake of their largely unnoticed demise, the Class 6 clans were often considered an unsuccessful experiment, a less potent sibling to the more widely regarded Britannia class, with their absence from the growing heritage scene of the late 1960s and early 1970s, further deepening the impression that the clans had left behind little of significance, and their story was relegated to the margins of British railway history. However, as the decades passed, a slow rehabilitation of the clan class's reputation gained further traction, with publications by former railway engineers and historians, many of whom had been involved in the standard locomotive program, beginning to contextualize the clans not as outright failures, but as victims of circumstance, with E.S. Cox, one of the senior figures behind the design of the BR standards, candidly acknowledging their shortcomings, but also emphasized their unrealized potential, pointing out the premature nature of their entry into traffic and their misallocation to duties for which they had not been designed. Others, like K.R.M. Cameron of the Scottish region, remained consistent in their praise, highlighting the class's efficient boilers, light coal consumption and excellent route availability, especially on difficult gradients and secondary routes in Scotland, and such testimony helped to challenge the long-held belief that the clans were inherently flawed. With the arrival of the 21st century came a growing interest in recreating long-lost classes of locomotive, fueled by a combination of nostalgia, historical curiosity, and engineering ambition, and in 2001, this renewed interest manifested in the form of the Standard Steam Locomotive Company, a registered charity established with the express purpose of constructing a brand new member of the clan class. The project aimed to build number 72010, named Hengist, the next locomotive in the sequence that had been planned but never built, but would not be a replica in the strictest sense, as it would instead represent an evolution, incorporating design modifications originally intended for the unbuilt second batch, along with refined drafting arrangements, modern materials, and improved fabrication techniques. By November 2017, the project had reached a significant milestone with the commencement of frame assembly at CTL Seal in Sheffield, symbolizing the transition from concept to tangible engineering endeavor, with the Hengist project having never been conceived as a museum piece or static display, but as a working locomotive, fully operational and capable of both mainline and heritage railway duties. With its moderate axle load and compact design, Hengist is expected to be more route-friendly than many of the preserved Pacifics, lending itself well to the increasingly weight-restricted environment of preserved railways, and in this sense, it is intended to carry forward the original purpose of the Clan class as versatile, efficient, and widely deployable. In the end, the Class 6 clans represented not a failed experiment in the development of the BR standard fleet, but more a victim of bad timing and a misunderstanding by traction managers as to the roles these engines were intended to fill on the locomotive roster, with their visual similarities to the Britannia Pacifics often leading to misidentification and accidental allocation on services they were not designed to operate, thus leading to their unfairly maligned reputation throughout their careers from those outside the Scottish region. On the Scottish region itself, however, the clans demonstrated their superb versatility across many of Britain's most arduous and challenging routes, allowing for the provision of a dedicated 462 Pacific on routes that, until their arrival, were solely dependent on multiple engine haulage, and in this capacity they proved to live up to the stalwart heritage of their naming conventions by their ability to master the often harsh and inhospitable Highland.